Today we're going to take a look at some of the most unfair election results in state legislatures over the past 10 or 15 years. In simplest terms, it's going to be for the state house and the Senate. And I've got 3 states for each side. This is not going to be in any particular order, and this is also just going to focus on the top line numbers. Some of those could be skewed in certain situations. Now there's a couple disclaimers here, we'll cover those in just a minute, so it'll be up to you to figure out which one is the worst. But let's kick things off here in Iowa. This is 2018 in the state Senate, and we're on Wikipedia here, and we're mostly going to focus on this box at the right. This has the summary. So let's see what we've got. Well, first of all, because it's the Senate, every seat is not up for re-election that year. At the top, we've got 25 out of 50 seats are up for election that year. So of those 50 seats, Republicans, they're coming out with 32 of them. That's a clear majority. Democrats are at 18. Republicans also picked up 3 seats. Dems went down 2, and the Independents went down 1 as well. But the popular vote for the state Senate that year was Democrats won it with a clear majority, 55.9, Republicans at 44.1. So that's almost a 12% gap in the popular vote. But Republicans are controlling 64% of the state Senate seats, Dems at 36. So that is a pretty big imbalance. Now let's get to those disclaimers I mentioned a minute ago. There's a couple of ways this data can be skewed. First of all, the biggest reason is, in some of these districts, the candidates are running unopposed in the general election. If you run unopposed, that means the other party does not get to contribute to that statewide popular vote percentage. It easily happens on both sides in safe red and safe blue districts. There's not a lot you could do about it, but if one side has more of those than the other, that's going to be a factor in skewing some of these popular vote numbers. Now the other reason this is skewed is these are only half of the state Senate seats. So in 2018, that was a blue wave for the Dems, but it's only a blue wave in half of the seats. The other half are from the previous election, so they're not going to change in these overall statewide numbers for how many seats each party has. Now in the lower chamber or the state house, those elections are every couple of years, so that's not really a factor in those races. So before you just say everything is pure gerrymandering, keep those factors in mind. You'd have to look more into the legislative maps to find out just how gerrymandered they are. But it's likely that once you start to get this big of a gap, there's usually something at least mild or moderately unfair, if not much more significantly. So that's the breakdown of this first state here in Iowa. We're going to go quicker through the rest of these states. Let's go to a blue state this time. We've got New Jersey. This is back in 2013. Here we've got the General Assembly, that's their lower chamber. With the vote here statewide, Republicans won it with 50.7, Dems at 48.7. That's a 2% advantage. However, of the 80 seats in this chamber, Republicans only won 32 seats, Dems held 48. And it looks like no seats actually changed parties. And here all 80 seats are up for election. Again, of course, there's going to be uncontested races in the general. But once you win a majority of the popular vote statewide, you'd think it'd at least be close in terms of parity for the number of seats won. Now in that same year in the New Jersey State Senate, we've got a similar result. Republicans were in the majority of that popular vote at 52.1, Dems 47.4. And this time all 40 seats were up in the state Senate, but Dems won a clear majority, 24 to 16. And again, no seats flipped parties. So Dems controlling 60% of the seats, yet they only won 47.4. Probably not the fairest map out there. Let's go to another state. This is much more recent. This is in North Carolina in the last election. First in the state house, Democrats did capture the majority there at 51.2, Republicans 47.5. Of the 120 seats in the house, Republicans won 71, Dems at 49. So another majority popular vote win for the minority party, yet they come out with less seats. Let's also take a look at the state Senate. Again, the Dems won it, 50.17. Republicans at just under 48, but 2/3 of the seats were won by Republicans, 30 to 20. Again, maybe look more into it, and there's more seats where Democrats were unopposed in the general election. That might explain part of it, but we're looking at the overall result, and here it looks like the Dems were shorted. Let's go out to Nevada. Here we are in 2022. And we've got all 42 seats up for election. And look at this, Republicans clearly won the popular vote, almost 57%, Dems 41.4. With that kind of a gap, you'd think the Republicans would have won the majority or were at least competitive, but that didn't happen at all. In fact, Dems picked up 2 seats. They controlled 28 of them, Republicans just 14. Now these are the most extreme examples, and when you get to that kind of a gap, it's easy to say that the map is unfairly drawn. And in this state, like most of the others out here, that's actually true. Now we could also look at the state Senate, and if you just focus on the main numbers, it's even more dramatic here. Republicans were right at 60% of the popular vote. Dems, 39.4. 11 seats stood for election, but somehow Dems won 13 of them. Republicans just 8. Actually, Dems even picked up a seat here. That is an extreme gap. Now, since there's not a lot of seats here in the Nevada State Senate, we can go down here and see how many of them were unopposed. Well, none of these first 4 were unopposed, and Republicans came close to flipping this seat here. It's a 1.5 point win for the Dem. But go down here, look at the other ones. In District 14, this has no Democratic opposition. So if the Democrats did run here, that would have narrowed that statewide popular vote gap. So that is one for the Dems. Here's another one with no Democrat in the general election. That's a second district where Democrats would have gotten a little bit more vote. And that's going to be all of them. So in this case, that dramatic gap in the popular vote would be more narrow, but it would still be clearly imbalanced in favor of the Dems. That's the kind of thing that goes on across all these states. Let's go to another state. Let's take a look at Wisconsin. Here's 2018 in the state assembly. Dems won this popular vote here. They were at 53, Republicans 44.8. So Dems with a majority, but they didn't even get close to majority in the seats won. 36 to the Republicans 63. The Dems did have one pickup here. And you can see down here, Republicans at 63.6% of the seats, Dems holding 36.4. So that is a pretty notable gap. Now, since this time, this map has been redrawn. Now, this state has been known to have a pretty big GOP bias on their legislative maps, but since this time, the maps have been redrawn to have more parity. But let's do another one in this state. In the last election in 2024, Dems had a huge majority in the popular vote, 56.6, Republicans 42.7. So with a clear majority of the seats, Dems were still held to the minority, with 15 of them, Republicans at 18. Now again, as I keep saying, keep in mind, in the state Senate, this time there were only 16 out of 33 seats up for election. So it depends on which seats were actually up that year. And this was after the map was redrawn to be more competitive. Let's do the next state. South of there, we've got Illinois. Here's 2014 in the state Senate. Republicans with a clear majority here at 54.5. Dems, 45.6. So Republicans in the clear majority, but they got very few seats. Only 20 out of 59 in total. They did pick up one seat, but the Dems at 39 seats. Now, there were only 19 seats up for election this year, so it all depends on where they are. It depends on how many candidates are in the general election. But it's another example of where one party is getting screwed. And the final map here is going to be in the same state, in the state house, in 2022. Here, this was much more competitive, but Republicans did come out with a majority, 50.9 to the Democrats' 49.1. And all 118 seats stood for election. But the Democrats came out with a massive majority, 78 seats to the Republicans' 40. Even though the Republicans got the majority, somehow the Dems are picking up 5 seats. Just like in Nevada, this was also the first election after the maps were redrawn. The Dems clearly taking a big advantage here. And this is the last map that I wanted to point out. Now, in some of these same states, as well as many other states, you do have imbalanced election results in certain years, but a lot of time it's just one party coming up short with maybe 3 or 4 seats, as opposed to these huge imbalances where they're in the majority and they have a huge minority of the seats. These are the flashiest numbers. That's why I wanted to point them out. But there's plenty of other stuff going on out there. It's happened in other red and blue states like Texas and Washington. And it seems like it's going to keep happening until something is able to stop it. And the last thing I'll say is, in a lot of these partisan states, such as Illinois right here, I wouldn't expect the maps to be totally perfect. That'd be really tough to do, but I would expect it to be a lot closer than a result like this. Both sides do it. They want to take that political advantage. At the same time, they're lying right to your face and saying they're not doing it. And some of the gerrymandering is going to be much worse than in other states, but I'll leave that up to you to tell me which is the worst. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about some of these terribly imbalanced state legislative maps? Which state do you think is the worst, and do you think there's some other ones that I missed on here? Let me know what you think down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.